And now we're all seeing that.
Yes, we can see it.
Cool.
Yeah, and this group has been meeting for a long time. I saw meeting number 34 on this first slide, and I was like, wow, that's a lot of meetings, steering committee meetings. Go ahead and advance the next one.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's how all the stuff that we want to cover tonight, and then who's leading the different parts of it. So the first thing will be an overview of the community engagement that we've been doing, not just the public meeting, but all of the efforts that we've been doing to support public review of the draft that's been out. Then we'll go from that. So it's part of it is the engagement that's been done. Another part is the engagement that's still upcoming. Then I'll talk a bit about the upcoming project schedule and milestones that we're trying to hit for the project beyond just community engagement, but for updating the draft and whatnot. Then after that, Chelsea will present a summary of what we've heard so far. And spoiler alert, there's one issue that's coming up a lot more than the others that we think warrants like a deeper discussion with this group. And that's related to land use recommendations and residential density, where we're getting like a lot of, a big majority of our comments on those themes. And so we wanted to talk that over here with this group. And then also wanted to talk about at the end, then the schedule for the next steering committee meetings, because we're sort of realizing that with the project milestones and whatnot, that it might work better to try to keep it more on this schedule of meeting in, at the beginning of the month rather than later in the month. And so we'd like to talk about opportunities to maybe shift that and, meet another month from now. And that's what we're hoping to cover tonight. I'll turn it over to Fernando for the first bit of summarizing the engagement efforts.
Thanks, Corlin. And yeah, I think I'll go through kind of this big overview of all the different types of activities and what has happened since we released that public draft. And I'll go into more detail on the next couple of slides. But first, I think we wanted to start with this timeline that includes all the different types of events that go from different RNO visits, the emails that we send out, that CPD send out, our communications team, like sharing information with all of you guys, and hopefully you guys disseminating that information through your networks, the different times we had office hours opportunities in the community, in person or virtually, and then highlighted in kind of those bolder bolder fonts, some of those more visits to community groups. We did the West Area Community Advisory Group that I think it's more of a group of different projects within Dottie, but a lot of you, I think, are part of that group as well. Valverde Parent Teacher Leadership Team. We had that in-person community workshop that a lot of you were at on January the 12th. So thanks for being there and thanks for sharing that information with your networks. And then we did another DPS update also at the end of the month. And we continue doing office hours all the way through November and December. I won't go in through each of the dates, but just wanted to list them out. We attended Sun Valley RNO yesterday. Right now we're here. That's where the dotted line is right now. Everything in gray is our upcoming engagement opportunities. So on Friday, we're going to Valverde to share some update about what we're hearing and share the information with the people there to share the engagement opportunities and direct them to the survey online, to the draft online. And on next week, we're meeting with the Barnum RNO as well. And then over there at the end, we just have a December kind of like, not a specific date, but just to note the ongoing online comment through Conveyo and by submitting an open form throughout the process. And from CPD, we still have programmed a promoted Facebook post coming up that will target a showing this information to the people in the area in Facebook, and then 1 or 2 reminder emails throughout this process as well. So this is more of just an overview of electronic communications as well as in-person opportunities for office hours, as well as our bigger public meeting and visits to different community groups. In the next couple of slides, I'll go in through some of the detail and kind of the reach that some of this opportunities have led. And more than anything, I think the electronic ones is where we can measure some of that reach. So with the October 27 release, we send out that email that overall has like around 2,000 page views, some comments around Conveyo, and some along open forums. Our subscriber list of emails is around the 1,300, and the reach there you'll see is the people that who have like opened the email or engaged or have seen that part of the communication. So other tools that we have used within CPD is Twitter and Nextdoor, as I think we've heard from different community groups in this process and other processes as well, that these are effective tools to get some of that information out there. So we've used Twitter, those 3 posts and the reach that it has generated there, as well as Nextdoor, and around 360 reach in Nextdoor and around 1,000 in Twitter reach. Other communications electronically that we have made, we send a reminder email on November 9th, and then another one in December. And again, in another Nextdoor post in December. And as I said, we have planned still a Facebook post and 1 or 2 remainder emails from our side of communications. Oh, sorry. Kind of clicking, sorry. It was like a lag, but there we go. Yeah. So in addition to the electronic communication forms, we did distribute a lot of flyers around the community in several community locations, some to some of you community steering committee members, other at different rec centers, libraries, and businesses, in those flyers in English, Spanish, and Vietnamese. And then the in-person and virtual office hours options, as I said, through November and then through mid-December that we're offering right now. And to get a little bit more into our bigger in-person community workshop that, as I said, a lot of you did attended. I think 7 steering committee members attended there. So thanks for being there and for sharing that with your networks. The 3 council offices were present, including some of our city partners such as Casper and Doug as well. There were a lot of different people, a lot of different comments. I think we had a very good conversations, and there were a lot of comments submitted, 151 there. And something to highlight, I think we always want to track the demographics of the people who are attending when they sign up. And these are the results of the people that attended, a little bit younger than sometimes that we expect in a lot of this community meetings. In terms of race and ethnicity, the majority is 61% white, and then following by Hispanic or Latino, 33%. And then in terms of the neighborhood, I think there was a balanced attendance of most of the neighborhoods, Barnum, Valverde, Villa Park. In this time around was Colfax. We didn't see as many people, and then Sun Valley as well. But we want to keep track of this to see who we're missing and reaching out. It just some pictures of the community meeting. We had a presentation format for some the people that were not there. We had an opening presentation and then an open format for people to provide comments in a variety of ways in different stations that talked about history and equity, community fit, safety, food access, mobility and connectivity, and then vulnerability to displacement in affordable housing and workforce housing. And just to kind of close out the engagement opportunities that we've done so far, just want to highlight the different community groups that we have attended and the ones that we're planning on attending here. As I said, we're planning on attending this week, Friday the 9th, Valverde RNO, and then next week, Barnum RNO. And then we have a talk to Colorado Jobs for Justice, and we're going to connect with them sometime in January. And all of this information, I think we try to have this phase of engagement in order to be able to process all this comments in order to keep with the timeline and the date that we'll talk a little bit more in detail that we have been talking through this process. And I think Cortland's going to talk more of the details of that timeline.
We have a hand up from Kathy.
Any questions? Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
I think one thing that was coming up for me, I was just curious. So what does that mean when you have a Denver Public School update? Is that to the administration? Is that to the local schools in the West Area Planning District? What does that exactly entail?
Yeah, that was more of an update. I think the persons that we talked to, Bao was the one that arranged that meeting, but I talked to them and I think they were more on the administrative side, in more along the sustainability side of the DPS, and then some other areas, but not specific to the schools in the area, I believe so.
Fernando, we also have a question in the chat that I wonder if you know the answer to. Are Twitter and Nextdoor the only organic social postings that we're doing?
Yeah, let me see. And then
There's also
Facebook,
Facebook, right? We're doing a promoted post on Facebook, right?
Yeah, the
Yeah.
organic are the ones that are not promoted, that are posted, like the examples you showed. I only saw an example from Nextdoor and on Twitter, and then there was a previous, and that kind of reminded me with another thing that Kathy was asking about on how you target the neighborhoods with the Nextdoor posting. I'm just wondering, I guess we communicate with people more on Facebook too, and get reach when we promote when we do put non-organic promotion out to get people to our events. Facebook seems, or was, where how we've been engaging. But that, yeah, and I'm just curious about that because well, that's not the question I have, or that I was asking. I thought it was just very simple.
Yeah, I think in terms of the postings as organic, I think if I'm understanding that correctly, Facebook is the one that's being promoted, like more of.
Do you post on Facebook without paying for it?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think it's more of the CPD pays for it and creates more targeted posts. Yes.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, I was just wondering about the organic ones that were coming out just as normal posts. I just wanted to know, do you have more? I mean, I'm really just curious about, are you hitting your engagement goals that you have for this? I saw a lot of potential reach and didn't really see much data on how the office hours are going with those type of engagements. Wanted to kind of know, like, what's that engagement like? Are you hitting the goals you set for this? It's going to help you, get council's approval. Is this, sufficient information? I saw a lot of things that said reach and less engagement, and I'm just wanted to ask about that.
Yeah,
I think-
and yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say that in terms of reach, it's there wasn't like a target number that we're trying to hit. We're trying to get it as high as as possible by using as many different channels as possible. And so we've been trying to spread it around, as a big mix of in person, virtual, circling back with groups, the social media posts. And then a big one is our mailing list. As people participate in the planning process throughout the past 3 years, the mailing list gets longer and longer. And these are people who haven't expressed interest in the West Area Plan, because they're on the list. And so we reach, a lot of people by sending out the emails and making that information available there. And they're people who mostly want to see it because they opted in to being on the mailing list. So we're kind of trying to do it like everything that we can to try to get it out there.
I'm sorry, I understood that part. I was just really wanted to ask a question about the engagement, how that was going. Because we didn't really get any more data on how these. I'm just trying to be helpful to like promote, like, is office that was really slow? Is it really busy? There's some other pieces even in this engagement outreach. There was a youth center somewhere mentioned that was going to happen, and then a restaurant possibly in Villa Park to have these meetings. And I just to not see them on there, I was just kind of wondering, like, did that get abandoned? Because I saw those as really good engagement opportunities, not reach, but engagement with, like, to promote. So that's the reason I'm asking about the engagement, if you're hitting your goals.
Yeah, and to add to that, I think like those that were happening on like the restaurant and then the youth engagement in Valverde, like those are what we're like, we didn't put the locations here, but those are the in-person office hours that we have within the timeline. And I think it has been more successful the in-person than the virtual. We have been able to connect with more people in person.
I'll move on. I don't think it's okay. Thank you.
And just to add, I do see a comment from Elizabeth about the Conveyo and the comments being scrambled. I did notice that yesterday. And I have flagged it to reach out to somebody in IT or something, because I think that happened recently, but thanks for bringing it up, and we'll flag that for sure.
Yeah, and I want to note on that I think I heard last night at Sun Valley that sometimes people also put comments, that they want to have heard, but might not find the right page. So I think that's happening a little bit. But I also want you all to know that, like, we get downloads of spreadsheets of the Conveyo comments that are like very organized.
And then I see another question in the chat about outreach to Latinx communities and translation of information and materials. Fernando, did you want to speak to that? You've done a lot of that work.
Yeah, I think the translation of materials has happened throughout the process. The boards, I think we were able to translate in all the boards and in the public meeting, as well as I think offering the office hours online and in person, both in Spanish. Like we made sure that there was always somebody that could speak Spanish in those. And I think there were some people, I think Val had a couple of those in person office hours that some Spanish speakers did attended. And I think the one that she mentioned as well was the Valverde Elementary Parent Leadership meeting. I think that's where we have been able to connect with the Latino community.
Yeah, and along those lines, that might be another avenue to explore is just the schools and reaching out to Latinx community, especially like in Villa Park, Bell Valley and Sun Valley. I don't know what the demographics are in West Colfax anymore, but I think that might help get more parity with what we have with the demographics as a place where even though our schools are diminishing in size, it still might be a good avenue.
Yeah, and thanks for sharing that. That's a good idea. And just to clarify too, the demographics that I showed were from the public meeting, this event itself. I think we'll have to take a final look and more like overall look at the overall demographics reached throughout the project to see where we stand there. But it's definitely, I think, something that we could consider. Thank you.
Heidi has her hand up.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just curious. I know that, and maybe we're getting into this later, so this might be too soon. But about, I mean, I was confused that I thought the Conveo was going to be shut down on the 13th of December. Like, kind of how, and maybe a little bit to Jaime's question about how, like, overall, like what is the expectation giving? I don't know whether you take like, okay, we've got, this is the population of these neighborhoods, and it's typical to have engagement with such and such percentage. Like, it's hard to kind of, I mean, this is obviously just to let us know, where you've been, and I don't know where you might be going. See, I know that the West Colfax RNO isn't on here. Although we are having a meeting Tuesday to discuss an open meeting, just talk about planning in general, and then also the West Area Plan. But just a little bit more about like what the numbers mean as far as feedback and engagement would be helpful.
I think we would like to get the participation numbers higher. Like the earlier question about have we hit the goals, there's not like specifically a target number that we hit and then we think that we're good. We really are more focused on the effort and the channels for outreach and providing a wide variety, and circling back like with the groups that are on this list that have participated before, and trying to get as many people to re-engage with the process and participate as we can. That's really kind of been the approach. I think that the Conveo closing like mid-month was a misunderstanding. We're not closing it, we're leaving it open. It's that the team has been very focused on this outreach effort. You can see stuff's happening like almost every day. They're multiple times a week. They're going to meetings at night or on weekends and things. And that's been where a lot of the effort has gone since we released the draft in October. And, in about this time frame, like mid-December, we're shifting gears so that we're not focusing as much of the time on the outreach specifically, but more on processing the comments that are coming in from the outreach. And so we're going to have some information on that too. But we need to figure out, what to do with the feedback and how it informs edits on the plan and create an updated plan draft. But the opportunities to meet with people and to participate and comment on Conveo, that all remains open, but the staff effort becomes more focused on processing the input and doing something with it, and less on conducting the actual outreach.
So there's, and we might be talking about this later too, but there's not a plan for like, maybe, I don't know whether the group wants to comment and whether there should be another big meeting or not, but yeah.
Yeah, we could go to the next slide after this one has the project milestones, and that might be helpful to see listed out.
Yeah.
Just
one moment.
So beyond engagement, like what needs to happen like on the project? And I tried to just make this like as clear as possible. So our goal is to produce the next draft of the plan by early January, right? So to be taking in these comments, making edits to the draft, and to turn that around, in about another month to have a new draft of the plan. And then planning board, we like to do an information item to bring them along on the process. That's an informal update. There's no action taken or anything, but they will be holding a public hearing later. And so that's one of the ways that we would use that updated draft is to say, we've done this engagement, we've updated, we have draft number 3 now. We want you to take a look at that, let them sit with that for a month before their public hearing in mid-February. And we can continue making updates, edits, collecting more feedback and refining the draft up until we have to submit one for their public hearing. So that's what that date is on the 7th. So the plan draft that's used in the adoption process, that's like the real draft that like then goes through the process. That would be the cutoff date, like for changes and edits to the plan for use in that process. Then it goes through the standard steps. So planning board public hearing, we have set aside on the agenda for February 15th. Then it goes to council committee a week or so after that, and then city council first reading, and then a city council public hearing, and all of that is like pretty set. So we have the spaces set aside on the legislative calendar, which is really crowded in the spring ahead of the election season. Everybody's trying to take business through council so that the current council can vote on it. Things that slip past the election season then has a different council and a lot of unknowns as to like who's sitting on it. So every department's trying to take business through council in the spring. So we have our spots, and that's one of the main reasons why we want to stick to this timeline. If we have any schedule slip or we lose any of these spots, then it really puts it up in the air as to whether the current council will get to hear this or if it will go into a new council. And that's a big unknown. So that's the motivation for trying to keep the timeline. Were there questions on that?
Kathy has her hand raised.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
I had
Yeah, I was just looking.
Question real quick, just to double check again if I understood it correctly. So you do another update for 110, and that's the plan that is shared with planning board as the informational item?
Yep,
Okay.
that's right.
And then you still are doing maybe some updates, and then you come up with a final draft, more or less, what you're saying, for the
Mhm.
2/7 time period, and that's what's really going to go through the final recommendations, approval or disapproval, whatever, with city council.
Right.
Okay, thanks. I guess one more follow-up question after that. When does the new council come on board?
I'm sorry, what? The new what?
When does new council come on board?
Oh, July.
July.
Okay,
Yeah,
so there is a little bit of wiggle room before new council is in place.
Yeah, there is. So the election happens in April, and then there's the possibility of runoffs depending on the results. And so some races might go to runoffs, others are settled, in the initial election. And then after the runoffs are done, there's like another few weeks, and then the new council sits in July. I think like early July. What the challenge is like having your spot on the calendar, right? So like if you get into that time period, after the election, before the new council sits, like there can still be business that gets done there, but then everybody's they're really long agendas, and we might not get a spot. Whereas right now we have we have this like basically reserved in the process, and we're on the planning board agendas for these dates, and that kind of, once it goes through planning board, that sets the other steps in motion to happen on these dates. Okay. Well, if there's no more questions on that, we could move on. I think Chelsea, you have the next section.
Great. Next slide.
Yeah, sorry, it's a little bit lagging. I don't know if it's my internet,
worry.
but it might just be a little bit between the slides.
Thanks, Fernando. Yeah, so I think we can skip forward one. So we've been going through the public comments that we've received so far since putting out this draft. So that includes Conveo, open forums, comments we received during the event, during office hours, RNO meetings, and other meetings that we're having. And so we've taken an initial read through to come up with these larger themes of what people are expressing that they like and support in the plan, and then some other larger themes of what people feel that there's maybe not enough of and that they want to see more of in the plan. So on the left, we have what people like, which includes things like traffic calming, increased tree canopy, improved lighting, food access, improved mobility options for pedestrians and cyclists, and transit, I would say, and trail enhancements. And then some of the areas that people are expressing wanting to see a bit more include improved public facilities like parks, schools, and rec centers, lower crime, addressing unhoused, the issue of people being unhoused, more protected bike lanes, more community serving retail. And then the big one that we're seeing is by far the most frequent topic coming up across pretty much every platform is increased housing options and more residential density. So if we go to the next slide, I'll tell you a little bit more about that. So we put together just some quick stats on 3 of the areas that we have the most comments, just to give you a sense of the frequency that this one topic is really coming up and why it's what we want to spend some time chatting with you about it today. So we've gotten 16 open forum comments since draft 2 was released, and 8 of those, so 50%, have expressed a desire for more housing and more density. The other half of those comments were about a range of other topics like mobility and ecology, but none were really expressing an opposite opinion. And then of the 115 Conveo comments, and Heidi, to your comment in the chat, it's not 115 people, but it's only 13 people that made those 115 comments, but 9 of those 13 commented at length throughout the whole plan about needs for more housing and higher density. And the other 4 who didn't comment about that, again, we're talking about other content. And then going through the boards from the public event on November 12th, we gathered about 150 comments across all of our boards, and 9, this was really mostly the comments that were put on our land use board, but there were 13 total on that topic, and 9 of them spoke to the need for more residential density, and 4 during the event spoke against having tall new development and some concern about maybe seeing some of those larger developments. So across those 3 platforms, which have been our most popular ways to comment on the plan, that is about a little more than 25 people from the public talking about this. So on the next couple of slides, we've just gathered a selection of quotes that to give you some more color on how people are talking about this issue, and we'll just give you a little bit of time to read through.
We have two slides, so we'll wait a couple minutes and show you the next slide just to get a sense of what they're saying.
Have most people read through this slide? Can we go to the next one? Can I see like some thumbs up?
Yeah, good.
Okay. Here's the next one. Most people finished? See a couple thumbs up.
Yeah.
All right, so obviously the big question here is what do we want to do about this? So I'm going to hand it off back to Cortland to talk a little bit about that.
And I just wanted to present like some thoughts, I guess. We haven't figured out what to do, but there's like definitely a trend, right, that we see with those comments about the 25 people or so really questioning some of the lower density residential recommendations. So here's our map that speaks to that. And this is what they're reacting to. The lightest shade of yellow being the lowest density residential areas, areas where you just neighborhoods with houses primarily. And then with our categories that we use for this mapping, it steps up from there. So there's low, medium, high, medium, and then high residentially focused areas. And we're hearing, these strong reactions to there being like the lower density ones, and people saying that that's inappropriate. But something I wanted to draw your attention to on this map is the little at the bottom of the legend where it says refinements from the blueprint map shows where the West Area Plan is suggesting something different from what was already in Blueprint Denver. Blueprint maps the whole city using these categories. And when we do a neighborhood plan like this one, we have the opportunity to change or refine it. And where you see that box around the parcel shows that there was some kind of edit that was made, through the West Area planning process. And what you'll see there is that your low density, low residential areas, it's what we have is consistent with the blueprint direction on it, and that we didn't hear something that throughout our 3-year process that made us think that it needed to change from that in a lot of those areas because they don't have the little square box around it. But in areas where we did make the change, if you want to go to the next slide, Fernando, we'll zoom in like along the gulch. I think we have that delay again. There we go. All right, so zooming in, for residential areas that like changed the most, it was really in this area inside of the red box, where the blueprint, what it originally had is shown there at the bottom, and the category there was high medium residential. And then we made a lot of changes there through this planning process and dropped it down to low medium residential for a lot of those blocks. And also, there's some local center, identified, near the transit stations as well, was another refinement that was made. And I wanted to suggest that, as an idea for how to process this input and respond to it without making wholesale changes to the map that everyone's been looking at for 3 years, that this might be a good area to focus on, where there could be an opportunity to maybe scale back the changes here, go more towards the direction that Blueprint had originally recommended as a possible response, and as an alternative to like really opening up the process in what some of those comments were calling for, saying like, we shouldn't have low res anywhere. through this planning process, we determined that that was appropriate, right, for a lot of areas. So I think rather than revisiting that, maybe we should think twice about these changes. And that was a suggestion that I wanted to make in terms of maybe how to find the middle ground between some of this feedback that we're hearing compared to what the draft already says. So I'll just pause there and wanted to get your thoughts and reactions to that idea or other ones that you might have.
Elizabeth?
I don't have great ideas, but I think I think that that's a good way beginning to approach it, to be able to name that those, like, to respond to the feedback directly, that we actually haven't, like, people like, you left Blueprint Denver, and be able to show, no, we didn't leave Blueprint Denver, and it's consistent there. But I think that what's striking to me in hearing those comments is a reminder of how much complexity and depth of conversation we have collectively been hosting, and the tensions that we've been grappling with, and not just slipping into black and white trade-off sorts of conversations. Somewhere in I apologize that I was so late in putting my comments into Conveo, but I was adding some stuff in there, and Sean had made a comment around high-level affordable housing and named the tension. And I think what we're seeing is we know, and what we have heard absolutely consistency, is that neighbors are concerned about gentrification and affordable housing. And where there's tension is how to go about it and how to resolve that tension. But I think it would be helpful to name more explicitly where those tensions are up front. And maybe it was in what I was pointing to, what Sean had added was in the what we heard section. And I think we need a name, like the tensions that we heard, not just the whole set of things that we heard too, and to be able to structure some of the nuanced tension around it. Because those comments, if they just said, like, just raising the density is not going to get to an inclusive, affordable, intergenerational neighborhood with a diversity of housing types. But talking about what are the conditions in which you were to raise density, where that density supports diversity and supports inclusion, it's not automatic. And those comments in the slew of comments are very surface level, and I understand why they'd be concerned looking at huge swaths of, if you look at the West area whole and you see Barnum all in that lower area, the very, very light yellow, it makes an impression, and it is still close to the city. But they strike me as very reactionary comments. And I think, Cortland, your idea of like directly responding to, we're consistent with practices of walkable, diverse neighborhoods, and we responded time and time again to other comments and surveys and other stuff about concern about rapid development that was displacing.
Sorry, I was muted. So I see Kathy is the next hand that I see up.
Yeah, I had posted a couple of questions that I wanted to get a little bit more clarification on. And again, you're talking about 25 comments. And so I guess I have a wondering of where are those comments coming from? Do we know if they're coming from residents, or are they coming from developers, or just people outside of the neighborhood? I mean, we have to live every day in our neighborhoods with what we have. And, it goes again to sort of throwing back to Blueprint Denver and accepting what Blueprint Denver is, instead of hearing what residents are saying that live and breathe and are in this space. So to me, if this plan is for the city, then you follow Blueprint Denver and you disregard anything that the community is saying. But if this is a collaborative process that you're engaging the community and you want to hear what they're saying, and can reflect some of those concerns in the plan. I think one of the reasons that we were very concerned about this area was the continual, and Elizabeth talked about it, the high degree of displacement that we were seeing. You know, and West Colfax has been sort of the poster child for that already. We already know what will the high density market housing look like. It's not necessarily going to be affordable. Yes, it's going to be higher in height and maybe even more farther removed to being a complete neighborhood because people have their rooftop little deck area, so they're not connecting that much to the neighborhoods. And yet we have just a bunch of housing that it was displacing of the residents that live here. So where do we live when this happens? And I think if we accept the Blueprint Denver, that's saying it's okay to displace people. It's okay to displace residents. It's not the highest goal we should have. The highest goal we should have is being taken care of people that are moving into this area. So again, it's who are we serving and in doing this sort of higher density. And then I'm also curious of what Elizabeth has also mentioned. It's like, if you look at the big map in general, there were other areas that were highlighted that aren't on this list. It's only focusing again on the light rail area. And I have a wondering of why is that just the case? If you're really wanting to see more density in areas, then why don't we look at the Barnum area that has got the biggest swath of land of single family units? And so again, I'm not sure what our end goal is if we're not concerned about displacement, even though it's listed in the neighborhood plan as a very high issue that we're looking at. So to me, I think we just need to unpack that a lot more and really decide what our priorities are as neighborhood residents living in our areas.
I'd like to pause and I guess answer some of the questions that were in that comment, but then I also want to just sort of like get it all out and hear what everybody has to say. So I'll just, in being brief, I don't think we know if the individuals, so a lot of these comments came in through the Conveo commenting platform and their names attached to it. I don't think we know if they're from within the neighborhood or not, but you can see the individual name of who made the comment.
We do
And then in
collect
terms of
residential.
focusing, yeah, sorry, go ahead. I might be wrong about that.
Sorry, Cortland, I didn't mean to interrupt, but just wanted to interject that we do ask like where people live and work, and all of the comments that have come through that I've seen so far, at least most of them live in West, some of them work in West. I mean, of course, people might not be honest, but that is the data that we're asking for and collecting.
And then as to why we would focus on this area as opposed to other ones, I mean, we can certainly entertain changes, in any area. But this was where we saw that we had where the West plan was making the biggest departure from Blueprint Denver, and also where that was lowering the recommended, residential densities. And it's along this transit line where, which I think is the rationale for why it was higher, in Blueprint in the first place. And so that seemed like a meaningful way to respond to these comments without, putting the whole map, into a rethink mode. That was just sort of our thinking behind it. And I want to make sure everybody has a chance to talk. So then next I've got Heidi.
Yes, thanks. Yeah. And I do like, so I guess there's some, I mean, this really goes back to the core of how the steering committee, started to have conversations and develop our talking points document around how do we know the density hasn't solved affordability in West Colfax or anywhere else that I know of. So it does seem strange to look at just this section, and it's also interesting to look at those comments that were very dramatic. And juxtapose those against the comments around mobility and trees and the things that, so that these things are separate, not just in the plan, but in the way people think about them. I know I've mentioned this at the end of our block, there's 140 units that are going to be, am I still on? Oh, sorry, 140 units that are being put in there, the parking minimums, you know, that's another thing that we don't really talk about. And I don't even know if we can address those things. But you know, we're just really introducing more cars, fewer trees. We're not really addressing the density, how high something is, or how much density doesn't get at the quality of life. And that's that major disconnect that just keeps coming up and coming up. And I'm not sure if putting this strip along transit, I mean, we don't have a larger transit oriented development plan, you know, and I keep mentioning this, but I just really want to keep stressing it, because if there's not an overall intention, that it doesn't, you know, it's just like, it's a crapshoot, you know, it's just like, oh no, let's hope it happens. It just feels like that. And that, you know, in these areas, like if we just go back to, or do what, either way, you know, a developer can say, well, I'm going to build 3 townhomes at $700,000, $800,000 a piece, and boom, density, boom, you know, 2-car garage or 1-car garage next to transit, and it doesn't address anything, you know, that maybe right there, you know, at 10th and Knox, the best and highest use is, you know, 10 units of workforce housing. And maybe that's what people mean by density. So we can't really take those comments and do anything with them, because they don't offer a depth of the kinds of things that I feel like we've been trying to get at. I mean, these are great. I love this conversation, because this is really what we need to be talking about, is what do we want and how can we get there, and what can we really affect in the plan that changes the zoning in a way that supports what, you know, that builds community. Thanks.
All right, let's move on to Jaime.
Hi, Jaime here. I just wanted to I know you looked at this, and I don't know, I think it's because of the mentions of, sorry, my plan's not bound. But looking at that, re-looking at that map again, you know, I think from the very beginning, we addressed where the current places along Sheridan and Federal were also like in much need of these comments that people were making. Like we said, you know, we got to look at where this already exists. And we were talking about Villa Park at first, like that's where the density like currently like is normal. It's not like a place where there's so much I don't know. I don't want to get too far into the residential piece, because my point is that like the light rail is not the only transportation areas, but from the beginning we were saying, you know, really developing along Federal, First Avenue, and Sheridan would really help to connect these neighborhoods, because we still really could not connect Barnum and Villa Park over 6th Avenue. So these areas that are going to connect our neighborhoods are along Sheridan and Federal, but there's just as many of these changes to Blueprint Denver that are commendable and in very strategic areas that are ripe for that along Federal and Sheridan. And so I would just challenge on how we are thinking about responding to these comments by focusing on one area that's really not the most beneficial to commute into the city or to connect the neighborhoods. It might connect you to Jeffco, it might connect you as a stop downtown, but it's extremely hard to get to from the other neighborhoods. But It's anyway, it just goes with the transportation pieces. It goes with having to connect these waterways, these open ways, these areas that people did respond well to, because it helps bring you from the Sheridan to the Federal, or the Federal up to the Knox and the Perry's crossways, where the density is still there, but you still can safely have your 2-lane bicycle highways in these areas. So I just wanted to just like take a step back and really, let's respond to not only how these comments, because I value those comments. I don't necessarily disagree. I kind of want to question the source. That kind of made me skeptical. But I also look at this map and see just as much of these not going with what, the big dog 2020 plan said. And I didn't mean to be snarky in the comments, but I just I didn't want to just like get past that, there's a reason why we're doing a neighborhood plan, and it wasn't necessarily to just go, affirm Blueprint 2020. We're on the ground and just want to make sure that we can look at this like as the whole plan. And unless I don't know, the rail thing is a very difficult thing for me, because it doesn't seem like it's really benefiting much, or even would if we made it even more dense. But that's it. Sorry. Thank you.
I think Sean had his hand up.
Yeah, this is Sean. There's different viewpoints here. I did put some comments in there about, because I'm more pro density, so some of those comments were mine in there. And I know Jonathan had some comments in there also, who lives up in West Colfax. Instead, he's not here because he's pretty eloquent with his ideas. And I agree with Kathy that a big issue is gentrification and people having to leave the area. And I don't feel educated enough to make a decision about what would, I don't think we're going to solve the problem, but what would alleviate the problem? What would make it better? Would it be to develop higher density, or would it be to keep our current housing stock? And based on my YouTube research, I guess I get to different conclusions, with a conclusion of more density, of higher things. I kind of feel like Mike had a comment in here. I'm going to steal his comment. I mean, he says pretty much, will more housing make things more affordable? And that, I don't want to go with emotion. I want to go with kind of data and hard facts. And I don't have enough hard facts to figure out what will maybe not solve, but what will help alleviate displacement and gentrification, which kind of path is better. And people have different opinions, but I don't know if there's any facts that could be presented, or we could research, or any case studies about this kind of a discussion, because this is something that's very divisive. Partly it's based on age and demographics. I think West Colfax has a lot of, I guess in a way, West Colfax has some people coming in that are kind of younger and white, and they have different ideas than people that have been around here for generations. And it is a complex issue, and I don't think I know enough to decide what's best.
Sorry, my Zoom crashed on me and I missed a few minutes there and just sort of rejoined in the middle of Sean's comments. Kathy, do you have your hand up again, or is that from the first time?
Yeah, no, it's not. It's a new hand.
Okay.
I think one of the things that also comes up for me is that there was such an intentional purpose to do that administrative zoning for the accessory dwelling units. And by and large, all these neighborhoods that still had the single family zoning. And so that was allowing 2 units in a place where people that could invest in their own parcel and be able to stay in place by doing that. And I think what we're seeing is when we get rezonings for those areas, we're seeing, oh, let's do 3 units. And I think, like, what is the difference between your 3 units and having 2 units there? we're not really seeing that ability to have generational wealth that I think we'll see in the accessory dwelling units with the single family units, but it still is adding more density potentially, but it's at least keeping more of that within that generational wealth component, hopefully. And I think when we see again, the new developments coming in, they're higher price. And I mean, I'm sure the city probably has a lot of data on this, on what those price points are of the new housing coming in, so that we can also look at that picture as well too. So I guess I would really support that administrative zoning that we did and keep that intent so that people could stay in place and be able to build generational wealth. This scenario that Blueprint Denver is calling for is not going to build generational wealth. It will just end up displacing people more because of the market that's driven by it. And I think we've already seen it. We already seen the evidence of that with what has happened in West Colfax is a very good example that's already on the ground, that already gives us price points of what happens along that. And it's merely building housing for income properties down the road. And I think we see that as a scenario. And we've seen that in the past that's happened where people have bought up units and then they rent them out after they've lived there for a while, or maybe they don't live there for a while, and they're able to build their own generational wealth and move someplace else. And then we're stuck with a higher density of rental housing, which has been a myriad of experiences after the fact that we have seen housing as it deteriorates over time. So I really would caution on changing that. And I think we do have a lot of reasons that we can offer to these comments that are very much with an intent of trying to support and keep residents still living in these neighborhoods and not to be displaced.
And that does seem to be the theme, I think, across many of the comments that we're hearing tonight from the steering committee members is, a reluctance to change the map from what's in the current draft, at least in the Gulch area. And I'm just trying to, anyone who disagrees, I would please, chime in, because we're just sort of wanting to take the steering committee's temperature on it, since we need to move forward with, responding to comments and making edits. It's sort of why we wanted to highlight this for you. So if anyone disagrees with that, please let me know. And Heidi, go ahead.
Sorry, I was typing this, but I just, I'm not sure if I can get it. And I think I was trying to say this, that and I agree with Sean too. Like, I don't know. I just know that when, I'm not a planner, I'm not trained in any of these things. I know what kind of a community that where density works, it's supported by the other quality of life concerns. And in West Colfax, we don't have the mobility plan isn't strong in the plan, and the supported commercial along West Colfax isn't supported also. I mean, it's mentioned, but I don't know, again, I don't know how zoning can force those things. And without the ability to live in community without a car, then density just creates more tension. And, and from a livability factor, and that also ties into affordability. If you have to have a car, if you have to get to work, to get to the grocery store, to get the things that you need, and this adds to that. So anyway, I just wanted to emphasize that the rest, that integration in the systems thinking. So thank you.
I don't see any other hands up, but I do see, I haven't, the chat isn't loading now that I've rejoined Zoom. I don't know is there anything in the chat that we need to, I can't see it for some reason.
There is some comments, and I think I want to maybe just talk about a little bit about the comments of Sheridan and Federal. I think on the map, and I was trying to point to that, like there are some areas where this plan does a change blueprint for like more density along certain areas of the Sheridan and Federal, like what's outlined in black. And I think I was just curious if that's correct, or if it should be more along those corridors, or what are some of your comments about Sheridan and Federal along with density before we get into some of the other comments that are on the chat?
Yeah, thank you. I see that, where there's how you had us look at this map. We're looking at the refinements from blueprint. I don't know if it was increase or decrease. I know what happened by the Gulch. I know that was a decrease from whatever that blueprint was. So I just wanted to see if we could focus on, because we said it from the beginning, and I think the biggest issue is there are two state highways that we've been pulled away from having a discussion about increasing that density. I don't know if that's what happened under Barnum Park right here, along First Avenue, if that went down as well. But I'm just thinking about those transit systems that are more reliable, that go north and south, and that's on Sheridan as well. Well, the ridership is down, so they've decreased it over the years. It used to be like every 30 minutes you could catch a northbound bus or a southbound bus either direction on Sheridan, but there's already pieces that are growing there. But then I look at this map and it's just like it's not looking like what's possible based on the comments I saw on the slides before. Like, I was just wondering, like, to me, it seems like these train places should have more amenities to support it, because you can't really get to a grocery store or a bathroom anywhere along this transit line. And that might be a transportation issue, but I think that there's more activation already happening on Sheridan and Federal and those corridors, and then more land availability for activation along First Avenue or even Alameda. So that's what I meant about that, was really thinking about that connectivity, because our neighborhoods, like, we still don't connect. There's still nothing. There was a comment in the chat here, because like the viable pieces, like for RTD, it also puts the safety of the sidewalks and the other mobility pieces that would actually improve the areas that we've called the most dangerous from the very beginning of this process, or even before that. So that's what I was kind of expanding on, and like we focused with slide all the way onto along the transit line, instead of like really looking at the places that it would gradually come in and feel natural, without displacing as many people or taking away current zonings that allows for people to still thrive.
Thanks for clarifying and adding to that.
I see Kathy and then Elizabeth with the hand up.
Yeah, thank you. There was one comment that I saw in the plan or policy sort of outlining, or with what we are sort of seeing with housing, where we have in some areas a really high single unit area, like we say in Barnum, I think you had quoted like 80% in that area, as we're in Sun Valley, it's like 10%. So when we look at this map, we really do see a lopsided map of what is really there on the ground. When you look at Valverde and Sun Valley and those higher densities that are in there, they also don't have a balance within what would build, generational wealth, and what would keep people in place, what would connect them more to some of those resources that are out there, like in Valverde, the youth center, as well as all the development and resources that would be available in Sun Valley. If there was more housing where people can own and build some generational wealth. So I think we do have a really weird balance, and it needs to be looked at a little bit more closely in that perspective. And I also would agree that First Avenue maybe also provides an opportunity. I mean, we have certainly bus movement. We have the one that goes through there, I believe, still pretty regularly. And we do have the three along Alameda and the Federal and Sheridan. So we do have those transit services along there. And then when I also look at First Avenue, I see many different kinds of businesses along First Avenue in pockets. And it seems like if there was a more of a continuity of how those businesses are within the neighborhood to be of benefit to the community, that would also provide some connections to services that could be enhanced a lot, is a lot more too. So I could see certainly even expanding sort of that commercial sort of area, that corridor that is highlighted along the First Avenue area to go all the way from Federal to Sheridan.
Amplifying most of what's been said, particularly wanted to zoom in. Jaime, what you shared, I hope we write it down verbatim, because there's important stuff there about what we've, there's a very difficult reckoning with how things didn't go according to intentions with the W line in West Colfax. And I think that to support the tensions that are in this conversation, being able to, I don't think that it's the neighborhood experience of what happened is there. And I don't know fully what to make of a cautionary tale there. But what Heidi said about systems thinking and an integrated approach is really critical. And there are reasons why it's really hard to have activated different land uses along the gulch. It's a gulch, it's in a ravine, it's like prone to flooding, it's difficult for traffic. There's reasons why we don't have a grocery store right by the gulch, like because people still drive to the grocery store. So activating those spaces has been hard, but I saw in those comments a lot of concerns about homelessness. We have a lot of intersecting concerns that still, like I don't know how to solve them. I don't know that our plan has recommendations on how to solve them, but I think Jaime naming that we tend to like get excited about having density by the big rail stops. What that density delivered in West Colfax is tied to the fact that our schools are closing. And if we don't have that up front and center, I think we lose something about setting the context in which we need to be able to have more nuanced conversations about how we work with density and the conditions in which increases in housing density also are paired with a density of other uses that actually, like, the reason you want higher density by transit stops is so that like people are using the transit system, but people aren't using the transit system if they can't combine their trips to other errands that they have along transit. And so people, my understanding of living in West Colfax, like I don't see all the people from the higher density areas along there using the transit system. I don't see a reduction in car use. I don't see the walkability increases. That's why all the neighbors said, yes, we want more affordable housing. We vote for upzoning. We want less cars. We, like so many of the Jewish community are walking anyway, and we want that. And so, I don't know, I just really appreciate what Jaime named around, can we, with bus rapid transit coming, can we center that kind of conversation more clearly? And when we address the people who are concerned, rightfully so, about increasing housing near transit lines, which is, I think all of us think is an important thing, how to do it in a way along those major commercial corridors where we could get a diversity of economic uses with the diversity of housing types. And I appreciate that shift a lot. And if we can figure out something to make things work along the gulch, that would be awesome, but I don't know how to do that.
Okay, all right. Well, we're getting towards the end of our meeting time here. I see Mike has a hand up as well.
Yeah, I think the conversation about, about what's happened on West Colfax and the gentrification that higher density brings with it in that example, is a really important thing to take note of. It is interesting that the Lakewood experience, and let me just say the development pressure there is very different. So with that caveat, but the Lakewood experience along the W line is a very interesting one. Metro West Housing basically took hold of the most advantageous development parcels near transit station or at the transit stations all along the W line. And again, not competing with development with developers in nearly the same way. But they have been able to really significantly increase the inventory of affordable housing along the W line, and give people an opportunity not only to have a lower housing cost, but to really lower their transportation costs by taking advantage of the W line. So it is a very different experience, but has been one that's been relatively successful. And any density of any real significance in Lakewood is happening along the W line, and much of it affordable.
Great. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's really interesting. Is everyone okay if we move on? We just had one more topic that we needed to get to. Hopefully this is a quick one. We had the milestones up here as a reference, since we're trying to hit the schedule. We thought that it might make sense if you go to the next slide. Rather than meeting on the usual schedule that we've been using, if we shifted it to the beginning of the month, that would mean we wouldn't have to meet on the 21st, I think, when a lot of people are starting to travel for Christmas. If we could shift it to early January, then we would have, we'd be making substantial progress on an updated draft, could share that with you. And then same thing in February. We could talk about a specific date, maybe at the January meeting, but again, meeting earlier in the month ahead of the public hearing draft, we think would make sense rather than sticking with the third Wednesday. So I want to see if folks were open to that, and if you had a preference for the 4th versus the 11th. We think either one would work. 4th probably would be better from working on the project kind of perspective, but again, really close to New Year's, and so maybe 11th is better. If there are thoughts on the meeting schedule, might save us a doodle poll. We could just hash it out here.
I mean, I could see supporting the 4th as a way to allow more time to give feedback on the revised draft before it goes to the planning board, even for an informational meeting. So that would be helpful, I believe, for the steering committee.
Yeah, I think that would be better too, if people are able to do the 4th. Any other thoughts on that?
That's a Wednesday.
Yep. Yeah, we did try. We thought Wednesdays seemed to work okay for this group. So we could do a different day too, but we always seem to land on the Wednesday. I see a thumbs up from Sean.
I'll vote the 4th.
Yeah. Does anyone have a big concern about the 4th?
My first day back to work after 17 days off.
So you'll be well rested and ready to jump in, right?
I'm just rubbing it in. That's all I'm doing.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. 17 days off.
Much needed.
All right. So it sounds like we can, assuming silence is an agreement, it seems like it's pointing towards a 4th, at least for now. And we could get that on the schedule. And then I guess if there are issues that pop up, we could address them later. If that works. Okay, cool. Well, thank you everybody for the discussion tonight. This was a really good steering committee meeting, and we'll keep working on updating the draft, and we'll send out. So we'll be canceling the meeting series and replacing it, with January 4th, and then at that meeting we'll set the February date as well. So don't be alarmed when we cancel the series. We'll at least schedule the January meeting, and then we'll follow up with one for February. Okay.
Cortland, I think
Alright.
you said you couldn't see the chat, but Heidi asked what happens next with conversation around the comments. Do you all discuss and get back to us? How does the communication go back to the respondents?
Oh, okay. Yeah, so we have our body of comments now, and they're still coming in, right? So we expect that we'll get more. We're going to start addressing them. And our goal is, in responding to comments, is to try to incorporate them, where they make sense and where they're consistent, like with the rest of the plan. So we've been inventorying them. We have the list. You saw some of that in the slides there. We go through them and sort of categorize them in terms of, whether we think we can make the change. If there's sometimes no change is needed because the content's already addressed in the plan. So someone might have made a comment and something's already there, so you don't need to make a change. Other times you don't make the change because it's inconsistent with the plan or the vision or citywide policies, or comments can be non-applicable, right? But we try to incorporate the feedback and use it where it works and strengthens the draft. So we would move forward with edits using that approach, and then highlight that at the next meeting, the changes that we've made for the steering committee's review. Elizabeth, you have your hand up?
I do. I had an idea. I don't know if I had an idea. We'll just say, there are these patterns that you've got already, and maybe there's a section on the engagement page that's like what we're hearing or frequently asked questions, and that maybe some of those could be like, the general tenor of so many of them was build it and we solve affordable housing. And it might be helpful to have a couple of those quotes under something of like, does simply increasing density lead to affordable housing and solve our gentrification challenges, or some like universe or something like that, and then be able to unpack some of the nuance so that it meets people with a very real concern about we are in a major affordable housing crisis, and every single person that I've heard is talk about this plan is in agreement that that is a challenge. And then it's just the nuanced different dimensions of what's needed to be able to actually have inclusive development and not just have it be affordable to people coming from outside of Denver. And that might be a way to be able to weave it. Sorry, I realize it's 31, so sorry.
Well, thanks. We appreciate any suggestion on how to work through all the material. So thank you, Elizabeth. All right. Okay, and thank you everybody for coming tonight. Good attendance, good conversation. Really appreciate your input and feedback, and we'll get those follow-up meetings set up. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you much.
Thank you
Thanks,
all.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a good night.
Night all.